Dreamweaver, Chapter 23, Goodbyes. Steve found Lucy alone on top of the hill. "What's wrong? You don't want to play with us?" he asked, but he had already lost the mood for games. "No, silly," she replied, smiling, but Steve could see a veil of worry masking her joy. "Oh, okay." She heard the disappointment in his voice, even though Steve tried his best to smile in return. "I wish I can tell you what's bothering me. I just can't because I don't know." Steve looked at her and surprisingly was able to articulate how she felt at the moment. A certain icky feeling? "Yeah," she beamed. Although brief, it was enough to stretch the smile to her eyes. "I don't know whether it's me or not." "You miss home, huh?" "That too." She chewed on her lips, fighting hard to repress the tears. "Me too. I miss Mrs. Williams. Maybe we can ask them to let us go." "We can't," Lucy replied definitively. Nervous tension hung around her like a fog. "Something's not right out there. We're only safe here." Steve looked inquisitive. Ogami and the others were extremely nice, but he missed the diner even though it wasn't a home like the one Lucy had. Maybe Lucy didn't want to return because she knows her parents are dead. He opened his mouth, but the words of comfort on his mind seemed wholly deficient. "Let's go back to the village," she said. "Huh?" She held his hand and pulled him along, but he suddenly let go. "Race ya!" he shouted and darted in front. Almost instinctively, she ran after him, rushing into the still air and creating an illusion of wind where there was none. She felt almost free. From what? She stopped. A look of confusion momentarily wrecked her happy face. "Lucy?" Steve turned back. She smiled again, but it was lackluster. They both knew she had not escaped it, whatever it was. Steve's chin crumpled and quaked. "I wish none of this had happened." The crack in the dam was too great for Lucy to hold back, and a flood of tears broke through, wetting her face and subsequently Steve's shoulder as they hugged. "But it did," she said through the sob. "We'll be strong and we'll deal with it. My dad used to say that he hopes life doesn't challenge us, but that if it does, then that is when we find our true selves." "I don't want you to be like this. I hate it." The words came out like a whine, and Steve hated everything about it. Boys weren't supposed to whine. They were supposed to be strong like Lucy said, but when it came to her being sad or pained, he was always weak. "Steve, let's fight. Whatever it is, let's not let it beat us and make us unhappy. We'll find out why. We'll go through it." Steve nodded, pressing his lips together. They were able to escape the Guardians. He couldn't imagine anything the two of them couldn't do. Plus, they were amongst friends. The children here were different from the other orphans on the streets. There was a sense of identity and belonging, and everyone empathized with everyone else. He was certain there was nothing they couldn't do. Missy packed. 3 days had passed since her arrival at the village, and it was the time for her to leave. She didn't know how long the children were to remain here, but Ogami had said that there was change coming. Whatever that new change was, it only mattered in so much that the people she cared for were alive. The work she had done probably confused the Guardians enough to redirect their efforts away from Ainsley. Now was the best time to rendezvous with him. The idea that Ainsley might need help sounded too ridiculous, but if he did, she wanted to be there. Hopefully, he would have found a cure for Eva. Missy could still recall the poor girl's flaccid body, entirely devoid of life. That was because she was dead. They imagined her being alive. That night was dark. They had gone through so much that left them physically and emotionally drained. How could they make such an assessment under those conditions? The image of a crazed, guilt-laden Ainsley carrying Eva's rotting corpse throughout the land haunted her. "Missy," Ogami called, dispersing the phantoms from her mind. He was along the edge of the riverbank, waving warmly at her. In the day, Ogami didn't glow, though his skin carried a bluish tint. He was already smiling. "Hey," she called back. In a few steps, Missy was at the edge of the water. Several other villagers were there, and Missy had come to learn their names: Sam, Fiona, and Tara. She was especially fond of Fiona, whom she met the first night while trying to grab at the enlightenment spheres. as they called those glowing balls. They were fishing, and Ogami was on the bank, filleting a few of the catches. Are you truly set on leaving? As we have said before, you're welcome to stay. Yeah, thanks. I have friends I need to find. Ogami nodded as he peeled away the spine of the fish. Will you be back? Certainly. Excellent. Another one, Tara shouted, knee-deep in the water. In her hands was a fish, still flapping, wildly defiant to the end. Ogami turned to Missy. Would you stay the night? She shook her head and saw the disappointment in his face. I would like to leave the woods while the day is still young. What about the children? No, it'll be too hard. I have explained it to them, and I think they know the dangers of running with me. Tell them I love them. Ogami shook his head. You can tell them yourself. He pointed toward the village, and both Steve and Lucy ran to her. She knelt down to hug them, and their combined weight almost toppled her as they threw themselves at her. You weren't going to say goodbye, Steve stammered. Missy looked embarrassed and ruffled his hair. Not good with the mushy stuff. Thank you, Lucy said politely and pecked Missy on the cheeks, making her flush. That's so sweet. Missy hugged the girl again and then stood up. You're coming back, right? Steve asked. Absolutely. I'm not abandoning you guys, but I have a friend who may need me. You of all people should understand that. She patted his cheek and turned to Ogami and the others. Please take care of him. Wait, Fiona shouted and waded through the water. I'll guide you out. Not wanting to trouble them further, Missy thought about declining, but the insistent look from Ogami and Fiona left her with nothing to say except words of appreciation. After another round of goodbyes, she finally set out. They followed the river for some time before crossing. Fiona guided her through the thick brushes to an old trail that made the hike much smoother and faster. Missy understood why Ogami and Fiona were so insistent. The woods was much more deceptively complex than she had imagined. At one point, they crossed under a large canopy where only the narrowest slit of light came through. Don't worry, Fiona said. This darkness won't last. You just have to see through it to find the light. Missy wasn't sure if Fiona was speaking literally or allegorically, but either way, the words comforted her. Moments later, they were out onto an open plain that hardly contained anything living. Well, this is it, Fiona smiled. As far as I'll go, at least. Missy always hated parting, and to do it twice in a day was a little too much. I guess this is the... Fiona spared Missy the awkwardness and hugged her. Beginning of a wonderful journey, she finished. Life's journey is written all over the land. You get some rich fertile parts and some rocky barren areas. But a traveler like you goes through them all the same, right? Missy laughed. I guess so. Despite her sentiments, Fiona was the first to turn away and entered back into the lightless forest. Missy's gaze lingered for a moment longer before returning to the wide, empty expanse ahead that made her feel so small and young. Suddenly, her heart lightened. Her worries no longer seemed large compared to what nature had seen for eons on end. In another 100 years, none of this would matter anyway. If you like what you've heard and don't want to wait until next week, either be a member on Ko-fi and get access to next week's episode today, or read the whole book for free with a Kindle membership. See links below. Until next time.